Okay, think about this for a second. What if our standard response to a world in crisis, fear, anxiety, endless debate, what if that was just completely wrong? Today, we're going to dive into a movement called Reggae for the King, and it proposes something pretty radical. It argues that when everything feels like it's in turmoil, the most powerful thing you can do isn't to worry, it's to rejoice. And that right there, that's the central question this whole movement poses. I mean, it really challenges our most basic instincts, doesn't it? When everything seems to be falling apart, the idea of praise, it feels completely counterintuitive. So how does this framework actually work? What's the logic here? Let's unpack it. Okay, so first things first, the movement sets the stage by just acknowledging a reality we all kind of feel, right? A world filled with pressure, nations being shaken up, just a lot of unrest. This is the problem they claim to have an answer for. So right out of the gate, here's the first counterintuitive instruction. When things start getting bad, the command isn't to panic or, brace for the worst. It's to look up. And that immediately reframes the entire situation, right? It shifts your focus from the immediate crisis to, well, a promised outcome. But to really get why praise is being presented as the solution, we first have to look at the problem it's trying to solve. And that is our typical, and according to this whole philosophy, our flawed response to fear. And here they are, those common responses: fear, confusion, argument, and just withdrawal. The movement basically says, yeah, these are our natural instincts. But, and this is a big but, it argues that these reactions, especially getting caught up in endless debate, are ultimately a trap, kind of like a spiritual dead end. And this verse is used to paint a picture of what happens when we get stuck in that argument response. The idea here is that constant debate can create this cycle of intellectual churn. You're always learning, always discussing, but you never actually arrive at a solid truth or, more importantly, take any action. In this is where the whole argument really pivots. You've got debate and argument on one side, and on the other, you have the proposed alternative: demonstration and rejoicing. The message is super clear. It's a call to shift from just talking about your faith to actually actively expressing it. Which brings us right to the heart of this whole philosophy, the command to rejoice. And they're really clear on this. This isn't just a good idea or a helpful suggestion. It's presented as a straight-up divine instruction. Yeah, and this verse is used to just hammer that point home. The language is absolute, right? Always. And then it's repeated just for emphasis. So what does that actually mean? Well, it suggests that rejoicing isn't about feeling happy. It's about performing an action, no matter how you're feeling inside. Now let's be super clear about something. This is not about denial or some kind of toxic positivity. Not at all. Within this framework, rejoicing is actually framed as an act of defiance. It's a conscious declaration of faith that looks fear and uncertainty right in the eye and confronts it. Okay, so how does all this theology actually translate into practice? I mean, what does it look like in the real world? Well, it all culminates in a specific gathering for praise. And this is it. This is the tangible expression of the whole movement. But pay really close attention to how it's framed. By saying this is not an event, it's deliberately separating itself from what you might think of as a typical concert or a gathering. The focus is aimed squarely on obedience to a command. So here's the formal definition they give. It's called a biblical response to tribulation, and it's expressed through things like psalms, hymns, and praise. But the key thing here, the big disclaimer, is that it is explicitly not a concert or some form of entertainment. The whole purpose is theological, not recreational. Okay, and this all leads to the final core theme, which is the call to participate. See, this philosophy isn't about just nodding along and passively agreeing. It is all about active involvement. So how do you actually participate? Well, the steps are intentionally really simple and accessible. This is not about being a professional performer. The invitation is just to bring what you have. Bring your voice, bring your instrument, and bring your testimony. And this brings us to one last really important contrast. On one hand, you have observation, which they equate with knowledge without action. That echoes that earlier idea of just debating without getting anywhere. And in direct opposition to that, you have participation, which is all about active fellowship and prayer, modeled after the early church. And this is where the entire argument really comes full circle. Remember, we started with fear as the core problem, right? Well, this verse is presented as the antidote, a spirit not of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. And according to this movement, that's the state you access directly through praise. So, what's the ultimate takeaway here? This movement fundamentally reframes what praise even is. It's not some emotional reaction you have when you feel good. No. Instead, it's a deliberate, almost strategic act of obedience. It's a declaration of faith that you make precisely when circumstances give you every reason not to. In its very essence, it is a direct response to fear.